Hello and welcome to another episode of Magic 101. Today we're going to talk about one of the coolest and probably one of the most useful spells in Negima.
Teleportation! Yes!
Yeah, what he said. Teleportation is defined as movement from one place to another, without crossing the space in between. This makes it different from something like instant movement, where someone moves so fast they just seem to disappear and reappear. Actually manipulating space is a whole lot more complicated. It's really advanced magic with a whole lot of variables to account for. The only ones who can really teleport on their own are heavy hitters like Fate and Evangeline. It's definitely not something a beginner can pull off. Part of what makes it so complicated is that there are multiple different teleportation spells in Negima, and they all have their own requirements and limitations. The first, and probably the most common type of teleportation, is the gate method. The mage uses a medium as a door or gate which they can travel through. Fate uses water, and Evangeline can teleport through shadows. I don't know if this spell has a definite range, but considering Evangeline teleported from Mahora in Kanto all the way to where Neji was in Kyoto, it must be pretty generous. The gate method might actually involve more than just transporting from one location to another. They may actually be traveling through an alternate plane. Look at this scene from Yukio Holder. Shang Zichao traps Tota and then Kuromaru inside of a shadow. They're not buried in the floor. It seems like they're inside a pocket dimension within the shadow itself. Now this isn't teleportation. They're still in the same location, they're just stuck in the shadow. But it could be related. If shadows can connect to an alternate place, maybe teleportation works by jumping into the shadow realm.
You and I will finish this contest in the Shadow Realm.
Maybe teleportation works by jumping into the shadow dimension and then jumping out at a different location. It's worth mentioning that Chao can also teleport through his shadows, so I guess I was wrong when I said that only heavy hitters can use it, cause Chao was a complete joke. But I guess he was just really good at shadow magic. For a long time, we didn't know the limitations of this spell, but we do eventually get some clarification in Yukio Holder, when Karen explains exactly how it works. And while she only mentions Evangeline's shadow teleportation specifically, I think these rules are a really good baseline for every kind of teleportation. Karen explains that Evangeline can only teleport to A. A shadow within view, B. The shadow of a previously marked object, or C. The shadow of a close acquaintance. That last one is really interesting to me because they never specify if acquaintance just means someone that you know really well, or if there has to be some sort of physical or magical connection between the two, like say blood relatives or Pactio partners. Because maybe I'm just overthinking it, but I don't know how Eva got to Neji in Kyoto. Look at these requirements. She obviously couldn't see the shadow she came out of, so that can't be it. Eva is 600 years old, so it's entirely possible that she's just been to Kyoto before and marked an object there. But she pops out right next to Neji. She would have had to mark that exact spot on the dock to get between Neji and Fate, who, by the way, wouldn't even have been born yet when she did it. So unless Evangeline can see the future, there's no way she could have known to mark this one random spot on the dock. She must be coming out of Neji's shadow here. But at this point in the story, they aren't really that close yet. But they do have a connection. Nagi sealed her in Mahora. To break the spell, she needed either lots of blood from him or someone else from his bloodline, like Neji. So there is a magical connection between Neji and Eva, and I think that's the only reason she was able to teleport through his shadow. The next type of teleportation is via keystone or gate port, which is probably the easiest and safest method because it's handled entirely by third-party services. When Neji and the rest of Ala Alba first arrive in the magic realm, they come in through the gate port, which is basically just a magic airport. From there, you can use the gate port to transport to wherever you need to go. When Fate attacks, he destroys the gate port's keystone and sends Ala Alba through with force transmission magic. This scatters them all across the magic world randomly. At first glance, this seems to break all the rules we've just established. They don't end up in any specific location. Neji and Chachimaru just land in the middle of a jungle. They're not in view of the gate port. They're not near any sort of specific object. And there was no one in the forest they could have been teleported to. Karen says outright that there's nothing harder than teleporting into empty space with no specified coordinates. But that's essentially what they did. But I don't actually think this breaks the rules at all. If anything, it justifies them. See, Fate wasn't trying to send them into the jungle. He wasn't trying to send them anywhere specifically. He just wanted to separate and disorient them, so he teleported them randomly. That's the key word here. Random. Remember, Fate destroys the keystone before he sends them through, so there's nothing to direct them. We never actually get to see how the teleportation would have worked if Fate hadn't showed up. But I assume that there's another keystone on the other end. I'd imagine it's very similar to Eva's shadow teleportation, only instead of going from shadow to shadow, the gate ports go from keystone to keystone. There could be a whole network of gate ports with a keystone in every major city, like a magic subway system. Okay, maybe not every city, because most of Alba have to fly to Ostia by airship, but it could also just be really expensive. Maki and Yuna have to work as waitresses for 2 months to earn enough money for the trip, so they probably couldn't afford a teleportation anyway. Or maybe destroying the keystone makes the whole system go down. The point is, it doesn't violate Karen's rule. The keystones are at fixed locations, so it's easy to travel between them. That's actually how they get to the magic world in the first place. They go from the gate in Wales, which may or may not be Stonehenge, to the gate port in the magic world. But admittedly, this is a little bit different because the magic world isn't just another place on Earth, it's, well, another world. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can't teleport there. It isn't super clear in the manga, but in the OVA, it looks like it actually sends them through an alternate space, just like with the shadow teleportation. The keystones could have their own pocket dimension that links them all together, even across different worlds. Considering what Karen said about needing specified coordinates, it looks like the trick to teleporting isn't bending space, although I'm sure that's also pretty difficult. But the real problem is actually ending up where you're trying to go. Trying to teleport without a very specific thing or location to lock onto would be like sailing into the middle of the ocean without a compass or any kind of navigation equipment. Or like trying to find one of my videos without being subscribed and turning on notifications. Hint, hint. I'm asking you to subscribe. Anyway, the next type of teleportation is built into the Pactio system. I already talked about it in my Pactio video, which you can check out by clicking the card. But when a Magister holds up their Pactio card and chants Evosium Vos, their partner will automatically be summoned to their location. This actually hits 2 of our criteria from earlier. The Magister shares their magic with the Minister, so there is obviously a connection between the two. And the Pactio cards can act as the marked object to link the 2 locations. Unlike the other methods, this one has a very clear limitation. It taps out at a maximum of 10 kilometers. After everything we've just talked about, this makes perfect sense. A little Pactio card probably can't generate a signal as strong as a giant keystone, and if the signal can't reach, the card has nothing to connect to. During the final battle, Alberio summons Takemichi and Kurt in a very Pactio-esque manner. Except I'm pretty sure he didn't have Pactios with either of them. Even if he did, he's clearly not using Pactio cards here. But it works the same way. He summons them to his location from a relatively short distance away, and he fulfills the same 2 criteria. He knows them very well. They were all members of Alaruba, and they traveled together for years. He would have had more than enough opportunities to put teleportation markers on them. In Yukio Holder, we see people teleporting all over the place, seemingly with no limitations. Keep in mind, Yukio Holder takes place in 2086, over 80 years after the majority of Negima, and magic has advanced tremendously since then. to the point where there are magic apps that let you use spells literally with the touch of a button. So teleportation is a lot easier now, but that doesn't mean they don't have to follow the rules. UQ Holder is where we established the rules in the first place. The only reason they even bring it up is because Tota asks, hey, can't we just teleport wherever we want? And Karen's like, no, idiot, you just don't know what you're talking about. So I'm just going to assume that every teleportation has to follow the same rules, even in Yuki Holder. In the first chapter, all Tota's friends are able to teleport to Yukihime with no problems at all. And that tracks. She's been their teacher for 2 years, so they would know her pretty well. And plus, they were using teleportation apps, so they could probably teleport to anyone on their phone's contact list. The whole concept of mana phones really simplifies things. As long as you could lock onto someone's mana phone signal, you should theoretically be able to teleport to them. But if that's true, there should also be a lot of security in place, so that murderers can't just pop up behind people and stab them in the back. So it might not be quite that easy. But you get the idea. The real outlier here is Honoka and Isana. In chapter 112, they are somehow able to teleport to Tota. This makes no sense. They've never met Tota before, and there was no way to know where he would be at that very moment, and they couldn't have hacked his mana phone because he doesn't have one. Honestly, this had me stumped for a while, but then I realized that they're working for Fate. It's a little out there, but go with me on this for a second. Without going too heavily into spoiler territory, Fate is intimately connected with Tota's origin. He would have been there when he was born, and he could have easily tagged him with the teleportation spell. Even if he didn't, he would know enough about his physiology and what's going on inside his body magically that he could probably whip up a tracking spell, or figure out some other way to locate him. And he could have given that information to Honoka and Isana. He essentially gave them his body's IP address, and they tracked him through it. I admit this is pretty far-fetched, but I don't see any other way they could have done it. Although if this theory is true, it begs the question, why didn't Fate ever use this to kidnap him? But I do think there are reasons why he wouldn't want to do that. And by reasons, I mean Eva. She was always around to protect him, and Eva is definitely not the kind of person you pick a fight with if you don't have to. Their headquarters probably has a barrier around it that stops you from teleporting in anyway. And even if it doesn't, he wouldn't be stupid enough to jump right into the middle of the enemy base when any of the UQ holder numbers could be there. Fate is crazy strong, but there's just no way he could have taken Evangeline and the rest of UQ holder all at the same time. He 100% would have lost that fight. When he does try to kidnap him, he makes sure to wait until he's away from Eva in a public place where he could take hostages. As for Honoka and Isana, well, I'm not gonna say that they're dumb, but I don't think they thought that far ahead. I mean, they attacked Tota right in front of Evangeline. What would they have done if she just decided to kill them on the spot?
Not a great plan.
Then there was also that time that Negima used this little thing to send Karen to the moon. He obviously doesn't have anything on the moon to teleport her to, but I don't think that's what's happening here. This item, whatever it is, probably just sends its target a few thousand kilometers away in a certain direction. Look at what he says. He only guesses that she's on the moon, and she doesn't actually make it all the way there. She's teleported into empty space, and then falls the rest of the way to the moon. It's kinda similar to the forced teleportation that Fate used at the gate port. That would make this a pretty unreliable and dangerous method of teleportation, which is probably why it isn't used very often. There are a few other kinds of teleportation in Yuki Holder, like Jinbei's Switcheroo, but that's not a spell. It's a unique skill exclusive to him, and Dana can manipulate space however she wants, just because she's Dana. But we're not going into that today. This video was just about teleportation spells as a whole, and frankly, I'm getting kinda tired of saying teleportation. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. And if you want to see me break down more spells and concepts from Negima, make sure to subscribe and click that little bell so you know the second I post a new video. Until then, you guys keep being awesome, and remember, a little bit of courage is the real magic.